Hello, welcome to History in Lowell with me, Maritza Grooms, and Robert Forrant. Today we have a special guest, Sebastian Cardona.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. So we've been talking about immigration history from the 19th century?
Yep,
right? Yeah.
you got it.
Wow, that's like...
History major. See?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to turn you yet.
Well, I think I should get an honorary degree at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we're coming up to Colombian immigration history in Lowell, right? So, and you're a recent graduate of UML.
Yes.
Did you have Bob as a
I
professor?
have him for like the last semester, because I was doing this project and he found about the project I was doing. He's like, come, I'll take you under my wing, and and I've been doing so for like the past year. I've been working with him.
Yeah.
Even though I'm graduated, I'm still working with him on this project.
Because you just couldn't get
Yeah,
enough,
no,
right?
yeah. There's so much history that you uncover each day, so it's very...
It's like a puzzle,
It
right?
is.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you've been working on, your research?
So I started last year as I needed something to do for the fall for a project, and then someone at the park, at the National Historical Park here at Lowell, was doing this project, and she was like, "I'm gonna be leaving, but do you wanna take it over?" So I took over, and then I started working and doing research, and then I found out about the story here, about the community. They were a group of tight-knit Colombians that they call themselves the primer enganche, which in English means the first hook, and it's very the first hook because they were the first ones on this long chain of migration that's still strong to this day. So the story as it goes is that basically since the mid-turn of the century of the 1900s, the textile industry in New England, especially here in Lowell, was on decline. There were many of the mills were moving down south, and the mills here were competing to stay afloat, but they didn't have no workers. So they were looking for workers. And so the story goes that in 1964 and 1965, there was the son of Lyons Fabrics in Rhode Island was in Barranquilla, Colombia, which is a coastal city in Colombia, in South America. He was there and he was studying and working when he heard looms, and he went inside and saw the thriving mills were very much booming, as it was here 100 years before. So he called his father and said, "Hey, I got a solution for our our employee problem." So they did. They hired three people, one a weaver, a mechanic, and a supervisor. And they brought him here. They did a trial, and it was assessed that every other mills around the New England area were like, "We got to get into this." So they started actively recruiting workers down in Colombia, and they found skillful workers and an abundance of people that wanted to come here. So they started bringing them here, and then in 1969, the vice president of a mill company in Connecticut went there and picked 50 men of the best factories in Medellin, Colombia, and out of those 50, he only took 20, and he brought them here using work visas. He brought them here, and all those workers, they had families, daughters, sons, but they knew that they wanted an opportunity. They wanted a better future for their families. So they took a risk and came here. At first, they didn't like the weather. It was very hard for them.
Oh yeah, well, you know, that Colombian weather is so similar to New England.
Oh no, it's not at all. I had a trouble myself when I came here first. So they settled, but as they came here to work with the mills, every mill that they worked at closed down. So by 1970s, they were out of a job until one of them, his name was Mario. He came to the Suffolk Mill, or as we know it now, the Wonderland Mill. And he met with Ted Latter, who was the owner at the time. And so Ted gave him a try and told him, if you fix this machine, I'll give you a job. And Mario does that, and then they become really good friends. And then Mario was like, I'm gonna get you more Colombian workers. So this is how the story begins. Then they started first. 18 mechanics come into Lowell. They didn't have a home, so they lived at the mill, at the attic, the attic for a while.
In the Wanalancet Mills?
Yeah, in the Wanalancet Mills. And then they started coming in. They started bringing their families. They brought their families here. They settled here. They actually, one of them, his name was Jaime. He was the one who actively recruited people. He called the work unions down in Colombia to help them bring here. And they actually started coming in here, and there was like abundance of workers. But unfortunately, in the 1980s, the industry fell and the mill closed down. But by this time, there was a lot of Colombian immigrants were coming in here, and they were looking for jobs. The first original Colombians, they went elsewhere looking for jobs, and the other ones stay here, and they found a job here at John Fabrics. And there at John Fabrics, they stay there and work there until it closed down in, I believe in 2001.
Oh wow!
And then we have been here since then.
Wow, that's like really carrying on like a mill legacy there.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the fascinating, as we first met and he started telling me this story, that's what it made me think about. It's sort of a pattern of people coming, working in the mills, and then second generation, maybe doing something slightly different, and then third generation are really here and embedded in the community. And so the fascinating thing was with the photograph that's there of the community. There's a photograph in the National Park building in the Morgan Center, where there's an immigration history exhibit. There's a photograph that sort of briefly tells that story, but like in 9 words, right? And so Sebastian came to my office one day and said he saw this photograph, and I said, well, next time you go, figure out who took the photograph. And it turns out it was this Lowell photographer by the name of Jim Higgins, who's a friend of mine.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah. And so I emailed Jim and said, there's this photo that you took of Colombian workers in Lowell. Do you have any other ones? And he said, do I have any other ones? I have about 75. And he had taken pictures of the families, their kids, sort of like this whole array of photos as people were coming in. And so I got him to send me all of the photographs. And since then, Sebastian's been taking the photographs around, talking to people in the community, asking them to identify who the people are in the photographs.
So cool.
I found a lot of like interesting stuff, and the picture that he's talking about in the park, even though I work for the park, I've been told him that since I found out the real history behind it, I kind of like don't like it, because in the exhibit it's worded as Colombian workers, but the bigger picture, because I talked to the secretary, the personal secretary of the mill of that ladder, and she told me that not all those who are in that picture are Colombian. Some of them are Greeks and Portuguese and Puerto Ricans, but they're in there, they're selling us Colombian workers. So I was like, so when I saw this picture, I like it more, because this is showing the community and also the mill. So it's showing like where they worked and all the family that benefited from this mill.
Wow.
And that's such an amazing photograph, because being a labor historian and an immigration historian, I've never seen a photo quite like that one. Yeah. Where you would see so many of the the generations of folks coming in inside the work environment like that, where you see all the industry and everything around it. It's just
Even
really,
the kids.
yeah, there's kids, there's grandmas, there's grandpas, there's the whole crew, right? And it's just really, it's like a one of a kind, however that got staged to be taken on that particular day. But it also is reflective of what we've talked about before too, is that after 1965, which is the story, where people are coming from as immigration picks back up again in the United States after reform in 1965, a larger and larger portion comes from Asian countries, but also comes from South and Central America and the Caribbean, and this is reflective of that as well. And so this is really this is the beginning of a much more modern immigration story in U.S. history. Wow,
especially with like the last mill that they're working in being closed in 2001. Right?
Yes, very recently.
That's really wild. Like bringing that whole mill history, like all the 100
yeah, the
plus
arc
years.
is there, right, from the 1830s and 40s when Irish workers build them.
Wow.
To the 1860s with French Canadians, to the various stories we've talked about. This is it's like if we made a timeline, it's like from here to here, right? We're getting closer to but we're never going to get to the finish, right? Because after this, then other people come.
Yeah, new industries.
Yeah,
coming.
But this is a really great story.
Wow. So, can I ask you, Sebastian, with this, because this is recent history, right? Now, and you weren't born in Lowell.
No, I wasn't.
You were born in Colombia, right? So, did you already have family here?
Yes. So my mom, when she came here first, and she had cousins. She had some few cousins that were living here. So she came here, and then she worked here. And when I came here, I was like, why you came to this town? Why not Miami or New York? But but then when I started doing this project, I was like, I kind of saw why we're here. So it's basic. So even though I do not know if I'm directly like someone from this group, it's like chain migration. I don't know personally who it was, the first hook, but then I kind of understood why I'm here and why everyone came here, because they came here to become part of this community, and they came to Lowell and they saw something about Lowell, and then in researching, and I saw why they make Lowell a home, and it was because it's different. It was different than other places. And one lady that I talked to, she told me that she lived in New York before she came here, and she saw that it was so hectic that when she came here, she loved the quiet, the kind of peaceful, what Lowell is compared to New York and compared to like what Medellin and Colombia is. It was different for them. So it was like a different change of pace, even though the snow and the weather is not great at all. It was a different change of pace. So it kind of made me like understood more why they chose Lowell.
Yeah.
I was just in Lawrence yesterday doing a workshop at a school, and we were talking about Dominican migration to Lawrence. And it was the same in a way, in that a lot of people that ended up in Lawrence from the Dominican community had come from the Dominican Republic to the Bronx or some other part of New York City, and then came to Lawrence and thought of Lawrence as quiet and peaceful, and the potential existed for more economic opportunity because it was a bit cheaper to buy like a 2-family house or whatever and start a family than it ever would be in New York. And I always find it funny when people say, well, they came to, because the outsider in around here stereotype of both cities is these are crazy places where you have to be, I still have friends who say, why do you live in Lowell? And when you hear people talk about they came here because they found it more relaxing and peaceful or whatever, it's sort of like, okay.
And to join this community.
But it makes sense.
Yeah. It really does. Sense. And when you come, you make this place your home.
Yeah.
And then there's generations like you who come and you do the research.
Yeah.
And I think more people should do the research because
Yes.
then they would appreciate Lowell a little bit.
I am open for business if anybody else out there wants to community research.
Yeah.
So when you started doing the work, I know one of the things we talked about is trying to figure out where people lived
Yes.
in the city. So can you talk a little bit about what you've been able to find so far?
So basically what I found out is that the first ones, they didn't have a home. So they lived in the TED gave them temporary housing at the attic of the mill. And there, when they found a home, they basically moved to the neighborhood of what it is, Little Canada. They moved to that neighborhood, and by this time, Little Canada was being renovated and changed.
Well,
And
yeah, because that's right after a whole
Yeah.
bunch
Urban
of
renewal,
streets were bulldozed and burned.
so what I found out is that at one time they lived at one of the Moody projects, what it is now, Moody projects, and they lived in one apartment, lived up to 5 people in one apartment, and then when they got their families over, they started trying to find apartments around the city. And there is one that I found pretty amazing. Is because there's a building that is still there. I do not know the specific direction, but at the first floor there used to be a bar. They used to call it Mike's Bar because the actual, that's not the actual name, but because the owner was named Mike, they call it Mike's Bar. But on the top floors there was an apartment complex, and so they moved there, and there were so many Colombian families there that they call it the Colombian embassy. So jokingly, because there was so many Colombians there, so they say this is the Colombian embassy. And there they live, and they actually got together. They celebrated Christmas. They celebrated everyone's birthday there. They were really tight knit. And when their families came, when they started more families coming in, they couldn't live there anymore. So they started moving around other parts of the city. Some to Centerville, some to the Pawtuckaville area, and some of them in the downtown area, like Back Central and all that stuff area. But they don't have a specific neighborhood like many others. Like the Cambodians have their neighborhood, and the Portuguese got their neighborhoods. It's not like that. They're basically spread around the city, mostly around the downtown area.
Wow, but they still.
Yeah, they still.
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of the fascinating tale, right, of going back through all the shows that we've done over the year, ending up in, the acre, right, which gets its name from Irish immigration, acre and half acre, back in the 1840s, and it is the gateway, in a way, to the city for most every immigrant group, big or small, as they begin to come into the city, right? And then, again, the dispersion, in a way, is similar because, like, second generation Irish, French Canadians, Pawtuckaville, Centerville, right? I mean, the neighborhood I live in, Lowell, in Centerville on Christian Hill, was, as it built up in the late 19th, early 20th century, was the second generation of French Canadian, Irish, and others. And, so it does, the fascinating thing for me as a historian is just to see how, even though it's never exactly the same because each group has its particularities, but there's a certain rhythm to the process, right? And here you are, part of that, like third generation in a way, if you think of your mom as second, and you've gone to the university and graduated, which is very typical, right? I mean, there's a large, you know better than me, but there's a large population of students who sort of have that same narrative that you do.
And becoming a part of the fabric of Lowell, being in the Lowell National Historical Park.
So I liked when I started doing research, I found similar histories, like how we said, the first generations, first and second worked the mills, and the third went to do something else. It's the same thing happened here. The first one being the mechanics and the weavers. They got the firstborn sons and firstborn to work with them in the mills, while the other younger kids, they were allowed to go to college and go to school, because they wanted they wanted some to help support, but the others wanted to basically get that American dream aspect. And it's just like, and then when I saw it, it's like how he said, like the different generations, basically it kind of repeats itself. Each immigrants, they come here and they kind of basically do this. It's a pattern of changing from one thing to the other.
That is just so cool. Like, I'm just like thinking about all of the stories that we've heard so far, and like you said, like that firstborn kid, or like your kids that come with you who are older, working with you to support the family, and having the younger kids being able to go to school. That's that. I mean, we've talked about that before. You're better off being the fourth kid than the first, because by then economic success and some stability might make it possible. Even back in the early 20th century with French Canadians, that might mean you went to high school. Right.
And then you might work in the mill, but you might have a more skilled job in the mill because you had a high school education. You could do math, you could do other things that might be required for a job that paid better, right? And yeah, I mean, again, sort of when we think about now in the debate about immigration and sort of the harsh words that get spoken sometimes about immigrants as, you know, somehow people who just come here and don't work or whatever, then you hear these stories and you see the photograph and you say, wait, no. I mean, in every group there's a couple of people that are gonna, you know, probably aren't the best advertisement for that group, right? But they don't represent the group. What represents the group is the story Sebastian's telling and the photograph that we're looking at of, you know, who comes, why they come, how they settle in. The other fascinating thing for me is that as we did more of this work and he read more and researched more and started telling me more, the coincidence of a lot of the machinery that had been in the mills in Lowell ending up in Medellin. And so a lot of the workers that then came up here sort of were connected that way, that they had been working on machinery in Medellin that was the same machinery that somebody who's watching this program now, their grandfather or great-grandfather might have worked on in the Suffolk mill back in 1920. And it just, you know, then I start thinking, okay, I need to write a play or something.
Yes,
sort of have the ghosts in the machine or something like that, and have people like loom out of the machine and tell their story.
That would be so exciting.
Yeah, well, you can write it together.
Well, yeah, and then we can make it like a Broadway musical like Hamilton, right?
yeah, then we can retire, right?
Yeah.
On the royalties. Sounds good to me, sounds good to me.
But it's a story that should be told for sure.
Yeah. When he's mentioned about the machines, is good to mention that there were machines there, but the Colombian government actually had they actually have an incentive because they were getting their industry at that time, they're getting it up. So they were these machines from here, from the United States, and they paid the workers to go to these technical schools and learn how to work these machines. That's why when they got here, they were so skillful at doing. And good, and also to note that here at the Monolenset mill, Ted Latter, he had an operation using old machines. He was the only factory here in Lowell that was using the old Draper loom machines, which was the very old kind. And that's why he was so amazed when he saw these Colombian workers doing it, because none of the people that came to work there knew how to do it. They didn't. The younger generation didn't want to learn how to work these machines. They didn't care to learn how these machines, but they have this new immigrants that were skillful. They knew how to do it, and like what he mentioned about the current state of immigration, saying that we need more skillful workers. I said that they represent the skillful immigrants who have more to give than to take. So
exactly, yeah.
And it's funny because if you go to the boot mill where the machine exhibit is at the boot mill, it's Draper machines that they're running in on the first floor of the boot mill, where they show you what a mill would have looked like in Lowell. A lot of the machines are Draper machines, and they're built nearby here. They're built just south of here in Rhode Island.
Wow.
So, and in Massachusetts too, in a place called Hopedale. So all these fascinating. And I mean, I had been in the exhibit in the Mogan Center many times and seen the photo, and I read a chapter in a book that a historian named Avi Chomsky wrote, who teaches history at Salem Salem State University, and she wrote a book about sort of the globalization of the textile industry. There's a chapter in there about Lowell and about this shift of people, but it's not, it's, you know, it's there, but it's not very extensive, and it always fascinated me. So then when I found out, you know, that Sebastian was interested in digging into this even more, I said, this is fantastic. And so it really helps complete just a really great and important story, and again, sort of amplifies the role, the importance of immigration and the way that it boosts the economy, fuels the economy. And as people were coming, Lowell's economy was at somewhat of a low ebb, and so in the late 60s and early 70s that these folks were coming in and revitalizing, in a way, what had been the dominant industry in the city was actually a shot in the arm to the city economy. And even though eventually by early 2000 most of it is gone, the fact that it existed for this length of time from the early 70s is in some ways testimony to those workers.
Yeah, wow. That's like every time that we're talking about all of this, it just really drives home the whole notion of how valuable immigrants are to Lowell specifically, but also to America. And like how, like you just said, like the boost of economic, well, I don't know the proper terms for it, but economics in the
Stimulus.
city. There you go. Stimulus. Yes. Vocab word for our viewers.
Stimulus. Don't ask me to spell it.
I probably can help with that, but
yeah, being a linguist, you can spell it.
It's just really, it baffles my mind, the kind of derogatory things and slurs that we hear about immigrants when they contribute so much and revitalize our city time and time again. And really do make up, and I always have to do this because we're talking about mills, we're talking about textiles, and the beautiful fabric and tapestry that is Lowell.
There you go.
Diversity.
Yes, good.
And I think that more people should, instead, we throw around buzzwords like diversity, inclusivity all the time, but I think doing this kind of research, you really understand what diversity is and what it looks like, but also why it's so important to have it in a place like Lowell and a place like the world, you know, where humans live, and we're all so different, but we all bring so much to the table. So yeah, this has been wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and bringing your research, bringing this really great picture to show us, like literally a snapshot in time, right? And thank you for the work that you're doing now, once again, contributing to the greatness that is Lowell, or that we could be, right?
So if any viewers out there want to learn more about the migration, about the Colombian immigration, and also about every immigrant stories here in Lowell, I encourage them to visit the Morgan Center, and if they want to learn more, they can come and find me. I'm around the park for now, and if they want to learn more, they should take one of Bot's classes. Then
hang around Owl Diner if you can't.
Yeah, hang around the Owl Diner. I'll tell stories there too.
Yeah.
And thank you all for tuning in for this episode of History in Lowell.